A touch of necromancy. Govordit, speak. Delilah commanded. Some arcanists spoke a foreign tongue to wield their magic, a means of focusing their power and intent. Most choose Latin, but some choose other tongues to flavor their power. Delilah had chosen Russian. Delilah was a dark arcanist. Her specialty was necromancy, power over the dead and life itself. That was how she found herself at one of the city's precinct morgues at 1 a.m. She was standing over the body of a dead woman, no more than 25 years of age. The corpse's eyes snapped open, and a milky white haze colored the corneas. It had been a few hours after her death. The body let in a sharp and ragged breath. Putrefaction had only just started, so the lungs were still empty of fluid, so the intake of breath was dry. "Your name?" asked Delilah. "Heather Hartfield," the woman responded. "Why were you killed?" "Information." "What information?" "About the Blade Heart." Delilah sighed. The problem with talking to the dead is that they took every question at face value. Their brains retained memories, but lacked actual conscious thought. "What about the Blade Heart? Its location." "Where is its location?" Delilah asked, forcing herself not to snap at the woman. "Library of Eternity." Delilah released her hold on the body. Her link severed, allowing the body to return to its state of rest. Laverius placed his notepad and pencil in his coat pocket. He then proceeded to slide the body back into the drawer. "Why didn't you ask who killed her?" asked Detective Jones. Delilah smiled ruefully at that. "She was struck from behind and died instantly." "Did she not?" Detective Jones nodded. "Then she wouldn't know who killed her," responded Laverius dryly. Detective Jones folded his arms. "She may have been able to take a guess." Delilah chuckled. "Well, I guess you'll have to detective that information out on your own." Detective Jones didn't seem to return the sentiment of humor. "You have a name, Detective," said Laverius. "That's more than you had a few hours ago. It'll have to be enough." Detective Jones turned his attention to Laverius. When it comes to the supernatural, it rarely is. Neither Delilah nor Laverius could argue that point. "We're done here," said Delilah. Detective Jones escorted the two of them into the office area, where Dr. Whisker was working on some paperwork at his desk, and Caliban sat in a plastic seat glued to his cell phone. "Jane Doe's name is Heather Hartfield," said Detective Jones to Dr. Tom Whisker. The doctor jotted the information onto a post-it note nearby and then returned to his paperwork, not bothering to look up. "Anything else?" asked Caliban as he pocketed his phone and made his way over. "An item and a location," said Delilah. "Speaking of which, what is the Blade Heart and Library of Eternity?" asked Detective Jones. Caliban's face perked up at the question. "Ooh, trouble and then some," he said. "The blade is a weapon that is rumored to be able to kill immortals. The library is a safe, similar to Fort Knox, for example," answered Delilah. "Weird, if that's all the client wanted to know," said Caliban. "There has to be more to this." Delilah nodded, agreed. If all they wanted was general information, they could have reached out to a divination arcanist. "We'll hopefully find out more," said Laverius, turning to Delilah. "I informed the client we have information." He waved his cell phone. "They want to meet at the Mud Pie Diner within the hour." "Yum," said Caliban, making his way out. "Thank you for access to the body, gentlemen," said Delilah, before following Caliban. Laverius offered them a nod and took up the rear of the group. Dr. Whisker looked up at their departure. "Trouble?" he asked Detective Jones. "Always, when those three are concerned," he replied, before heading back up to his desk to start hunting down a killer. The bell tinkled to announce the trio's presence as they stepped into the Mud Pie Diner. Laverius took point, Delilah second, and Caliban third. Laverius, as a werewolf, was able to note various supernaturals throughout the diner. The usual crowd of lichens, fey, and magic users. Surprisingly, a vampire took residence in the corner, fortunately not their contact. So not the team's concern. Their actual contact was a gentleman in a tailored suit sitting in a booth admiring the nightlife outside the window. He was enjoying a slice of mud pie. Laverius motioned with his head. Delilah turned her attention to the gentleman and proceeded to walk over. Laverius followed. Caliban instead made his way to the counter. "Aunt Hilda, your favorite nephew has returned." "I wasn't aware Joshua was in town," she responded. "Funny," Caliban responded with a dramatic pained look upon his face. "You hurt me, Auntie." "And you know I don't have favorites," Hilda said, smiling warmly. "Fair, but I assume ordering some food may score me some points?" asked Caliban. "Perhaps," she said as she pulled out a pen from behind her ear and an ordering pad from her apron. Delilah sat across from the gentleman who was sitting closer towards the window. Laverius took a seat next to her. He wasn't a fan of boxing her in, but wanted to be able to exit the booth quickly if need be. The gentleman, as he called himself, turned his attention from the outside nightlife and focused on the two people across from him. With an absent wave of his hand, an opaque sphere appeared around them. A spell used for silence and discretion. None outside the bubble could hear or see them. Regardless, Delilah had a shared link with both Laverius and Caliban, a gold ring they each wore. Caliban would still know if they were in trouble, shielded or not. "Nice to see you both," the gentleman said with a nod. "I was most pleased to receive Mr. Gray's text. You have information, then?" "Yes," started Delilah. The young girl was Heather Heartfield. She had information regarding a unique weapon and its location. The gentleman smiled. "The blade heart in the Library of Eternity," he answered with a nod. Delilah wasn't surprised the man was aware of this. It was obvious such a simple task for information wouldn't require a necromancer, let alone one with a werewolf and Cambion bodyguard. Still, he readily knew the answers with such ease. Delilah tapped her manicured nails on the table. She smiled. Laverius tensed. Delilah was upset. "Enlighten me then," Delilah said, her tone calm. "Even Sunny, some would say. Why did you hire my team?" Laverius could feel a hum of arcane power radiate off of her. Her brown eyes slowly became black voids, her standard intimidation tactic. The gentleman seemed unfazed. Either he was foolish or good at hiding fear. "Miss Starr," the gentleman said, "I am fully aware of your team's talents. My humble apologies for the deceit. My boss needed to make sure you were capable." "Capable for what?" asked Laverius, keeping an illusion of calm. "A special job," the gentleman smiled. "You passed the first test wonderfully," he said before waving his hand again. A fireball formed into existence before them. "To test number 2, then?" he asked with a devilish grin. Laverius took note of how the sphere of flame began to expand outward. His initial reaction had been to shield Delilah with his body, but because of the necrotic energy radiating off her, thought better of it. Delilah shot her hands forward into the flame. Yes, she was a necromancer. But her magic stemmed from darkness. Darkness consumed light. She allowed her necrotic energy to expand outward. Delilah's power was interfering with the gentleman's spell, slowing it. But the fire was still expanding. Her power was not a true counter to the fire magic. Worse, her power wasn't protecting her. The fire still burned. She was able to use her magic to numb the pain, but her hands were getting severely damaged. Then the magic was gone, all of it. The barrier around them, the fireball, and Delilah's necromantic touch. A demonic scaled hand gently held Delilah's wrist. An instant later, the demonic hand was human flesh once more. Delilah yanked her injured hands back and cradled them in her lap. Caliban stood at the edge of the table. His other hand balanced a tray of burgers and fries. He placed the tray on the table in front of everyone. The gentleman looked surprised, but that quickly shifted to pleasure. "Most impressive," he said. "I'd heard things about you half-breed," he tilted his head. "But to witness it." He looked with eyes of wonder upon Caliban. Caliban, who was usually smiles, confidence, and flirtation personified, looked at the gentleman with mild annoyance. "It's late," he stated plainly. "My friends and I are hungry and tired. We spent the day tracking down your missing informant, only to find out they were already dead." "As I informed your team it was a test," started the gentleman. Caliban had a cold iron blade under the gentleman's throat. "I don't care." The gentleman stiffened. His warm demeanor turned angry. Clearly he wasn't used to being treated so roughly. "Enough," snapped Laverius. He gripped Caliban's arm and pulled it away from the gentleman. He then placed a hand on Delilah's shoulder. Her necrotic energy, restored after releasing herself from Caliban's grip, started to immediately feed on Laverius's life force, specifically his enhanced healing ability, once he touched her. Within short order, Delilah's severely burned hands went from burned beyond recognition to soft, supple skin, not a scar or blemish upon them. "What do you want from us?" asked Laverius. The gentleman regained his composure, sliding from the booth and standing before the three of them. After tossing money upon the table, he said, "Get the weapon. Return it to the Summer Court. In return, you shall be released from your contract and paid the total sum of $500,000. "And if we refuse?" asked Delilah, her composure returned. The gentleman smiled. "You accepted the job the moment you agreed to hunt down my informant." He stepped back from Caliban. "You can't refuse. But, put simply, the Summer Court doesn't care for broken deals." Caliban moved to engage the gentleman, but he was already gone. A flash of light, and all that remained was the smell of wildflowers. The three of them ate in silence. Hilda placed 3 slices of mud pie, one before each of them. "Meals on the house. A thank you for preventing that Fey from harming my diner." Laverius looked at her curiously. "You saw the spell he cast?" She nodded. "This is my diner. No one hides anything from me." Laverius nodded respectfully. "I doubt the gentleman would have allowed damage or harm to occur beyond us 3. Laverius made a circular gesture, including Delilah and Caliban. Hilda snorted. "Dear, I'm a demon, and while I don't trust any of my kind, I trust Fey even less." "Why's that?" asked Delilah. "You know where you stand with a demon, but never a Fey," Caliban answered. "So what's our next step?" Delilah sighed. "We need more information, a starting point." Laverius and Caliban looked at each other, knowing where her line of thinking was going. "Harold," they said in unison. "Harold," Delilah agreed. Harold Horder was not human. The problem was that no one knew what he was. But what he offered was information, rare objects, and magic. Harold collected it all and sold it all. His shop was well known by many in the supernatural community. Many people came to him for the impossible or hard to find. He wasn't cheap, but he always delivered. The trio found themselves in his shop the following late morning. Sleep had been required after the previous day's events. "Welcome, welcome," said Harold. "Ah, some of my favorite customers," he smiled. Harold appeared as an older gentleman, a human in his late 80s. No one questioned his glamour nor tried to peer past it. Even Caliban, who had a unique gift of being able to nullify any magic he touched, couldn't penetrate whatever spells Harold used to hide his true nature. "In trouble with the Summer Court, I hear," said Harold with a chuckle. It had only been less than a day since the incident at the diner, but word travels quickly in the supernatural world. "Currently we have a deal with the Summer Court. The trouble comes if we fail to uphold our end of that deal," said Delilah. "Where the Fey are concerned, trouble starts well before and lasts long after," responded Harold. The trio couldn't argue that. "Now then," Harold said with a clap of his weathered hands, "how can I help?" "Seeing as we are dealing with the Summer Court, I'm surprised you're willing to get involved," said Caliban. "My dear boy," said Harold, "if I worried about who I helped, my business would have failed long ago." "Information," answered Laverius, "about the Library of Eternity." "Ah, yes, the fail-safe of insidious magic. The one place where all magic goes that shouldn't be permitted in the mortal or supernatural realm." Harold looked upon his own shop of odd amenities of power and chuckled. "What about it?" "We need to get inside it," said Delilah. Harold raised his brow at that. "My dear, no one, including myself, can break into that establishment." "Which is why we need to know how to get in," Delilah repeated. Harold sighed. He knew, of course. He was one of the keepers of the information he was not to share. Well, shouldn't. But he was the man of knowledge, was he not? Who was he to keep such insight from those who asked? Well, those who paid. Knowledge, like magic, always had a price. "The Athena Noctua, the little owl. I want it," said Harold. The trio looked at each other. Harold smiled. "It's also in the vault. I'll tell you how to get in. In return, you bring me the golden owl of wisdom. Agreed?" Delilah was none too pleased with how things were turning out. She already owed the Summer Court a favor. And now Harold, too, another being of great power who she would be indebted to. But then again, if she or her team failed in the recovery of these items, she would be dead and not have to concern herself after all. Though, if she were honest with herself. In the supernatural world, death didn't mean much. Hell, as a necromancer, Delilah understood that better than most. "Agreed," said Laverius, the owl in exchange for the way in. Delilah and Caliban looked at Laverius with surprise. He was the more pragmatic of the group, calm and level-headed, never the first to speak up. Sensing their shock, Laverius turned to them. "We are trapped in a corner with no way out. Either we succeed or suffer the consequences. What's one more deal?" Neither of them could disagree. "Wonderful. Most wonderful," said Harold. "There are 5 people who have access to the vault. You'll need to seek one of them out and have them provide you their key to get in." "Perhaps," requested Caliban, "you could offer up a name." Harold made a gesture of hitting his head. Of course, he said, smiling to himself. Penelope Blackstone, First Lady to the Mayor of Normal. Normal, Caliban perked up at that. My uncle Caliban is currently living there. Delilah and Laverius shared a look. Your Uncle Caliban? Asked Delilah. Yeah, he may be even able to help us, Caliban said. But your name is Caliban, too, said Laverius. Right, my mother named me after her brother, said Caliban. But that must get awfully confusing at family gatherings when both of you are present, said Delilah. Yeah, said Caliban with a grin, so when do we leave?